Okay, so this is a Unit 2 right trig ELC review. Okay, so we're going to start with, we're working with triangles. So we're just going to label the parts of the triangle. First of all, we're going to identify the right angle, or what you would call the 90-degree angle. So that's very important. Okay, and then always across from the 90-degree angle is your hypotenuse. Always. Okay, always remember that. Always. So across from the 90. The 90-degree angle, or the right angle. Okay, and you want to find the angle they are identifying. This one here, they are already telling me angle A. Okay? So our angle is angle A. And you may see it written with the little symbol for angle. Okay, opposite means it's the farthest away from the angle and it's not touching. So let me type that up. So the farthest away or not touching. Okay? So if we look here, it's the farthest away from the angle. So my angle is here. If you look here, this line here is touching it, and we know this line here is touching it. Well, we know this one couldn't be it because it's a hypotenuse. So the only one that's not touching it would be this green line I'm forming here. So that would be my opposite side. Okay? My adjacent side is obvious. The other side that's touching the angle. So it's touching the angle. Okay? So my adjacent side will be right here. ADJ. And I'm abbreviating this. Opposite OPP, hypotenuse HYP, and then adjacent ADJ. Okay, so that's the first step in doing this. It's always labeling. So if you want to try the next one, just pause the video and try it. But I'm going to go over it. Okay? So we're going to label the parts again. Right angle, or 90. The hypotenuse is always across from the 90. So here's my 90. That makes my hypotenuse. Okay? Then my angle. So the angle that I have identified here is angle B. Okay? So angle B. So now we need to figure out the opposite. The one that's not touching the angle, he's the farthest away. So if I look here, so let's look at angle B. So he's touching the hypotenuse line, and he's touching this line here. So that means it has to be this line that's the farthest away. Has to be my opposite, OPP. That means this line over here will have to be adjacent. Okay? So you can go back and watch this video as many times as you need. Okay, so now we're going to be working with finding the sine, the cosine, and the tangent of angle A. So the first thing we're going to do, we're going to identify our parts that we were talking about. So 90 degrees is right here. Across from the 90 always is the hypotenuse. Now, when you're doing these, make sure you're always reading the question, because the question a lot of times gives you information. It says find the sine, the cosine, and the tangent of angle A. So it told us what angle we're working with. And I also put a little man here, but we're working with angle A. That's very important. We got to know the angle. Okay? So now, that right there, we're going to label the opposite. So if you look here, I know 6 is touching this angle. So 9 has to be my opposite. And then 6 has to be my adjacent. Okay, so now this one's kind of done for us, but don't always expect it to be done. It tells us to find the sine of angle A. And so, first of all, it gave us the formula. But on our formula sheet, we would have to come over here and find the one that gives us sine. So sine of, remember this little egg-like shape means angle. So the sine of angle equals opposite divided by hypotenuse. So that's the one we're using. So all we have to do then is look at what number do we have for opposite. Which number do we have for hypotenuse? So opposite will be your 9 over here. So it should be 9 over 10.8. Okay? So cosine. So if we use our formula sheet, cosine will be adjacent over hypotenuse. Okay? So all we got to do is look at adjacent will be 6. Hypotenuse will be 10.8. So 6 over 10.8. And guys, we always want to put these in our calculators. You'll put 6 n over d 10.8 to see if it simplifies, because sometimes they will simplify. Okay, so if we looking for tan says tan of angle equals opposite over adjacent. So opposite would be 9 over adjacent, 9 over 6. But we're going to put this in our calculator, 9 n over d 6. And it's going to simplify to 3 over 2. So try the next one on your own. I'm going to actually do it, but you'll have problems to do. Okay, so let's first label. So once again, we're working with angle A. So we're going to do our 90 degree. We know 24.5 will be our hypotenuse. Our opposite will be the one that's not touching, the one that's farthest away. And then our adjacent will be the one closer to that angle. So once again, we have our formulas. Opposite over hypotenuse for sine. So opposite 8.2 over 24.5. Okay, now cosine is adjacent, so 23.1 over hypotenuse of 24.5. And then your last one will be your tan. Tan is opposite over adjacent, so 8.2 over 23.1. And now you should have some problems to work on your own that you will turn in with this web quest. Okay, so the next section of Unit 2 talks about when we are trying to find a side. So, and when they're talking about when we find a side, you have a triangle, and I may give you an angle 10, and I may give you 3 here, and just say maybe a question mark here. So that's what we're talking about, a side. I'm trying to find a side. We're going to use sine, cosine, and tan. Okay, down here at the bottom, it says when we are trying to find an angle. So these are key. So when we're trying to find an angle, we use the inverse. The inverse is sine of -1, cosine of -1, or tan of -1. And remember, to get that to come up, you got to press the second key, and then whatever function, whatever trig function. If it's sine, and it should come up sine -1. Or if you're using cosine, you press second cosine. Or if you're using tan, second tan. Okay? So our first ones that we're going to go over have to deal with finding a side. And the outsides of the triangles are your sides. So what we're going to do first, it says figure out which ratio to use. And then find x. Round to the nearest tenth. Okay? So what we're going to do first with triangles, we're going to always label, label, label. That's very important. So here's my 90 degree angle. I know across from here is always my hypotenuse. Okay? And this time, they did give me an angle. They didn't have to tell me really, because I see it's on the inside. They gave me angle 55. So that's my angle. Okay? So I know opposite is the one that's not close to it, so that will be x. And then 20 would be my adjacent. Okay? And so what I always do is tell people when we get to these, circle the one that has the letter. That will be your opposite. And circle the one that has the number. And so that will be 20 for adjacent. Okay? And then we're going to look at our formula sheet. And let me see, can I put the formula sheet back up? Okay? We're going to look at our formula sheet. And we're going to look for the ones that use opposite and adjacent. So let's look through. Sine use opposite hypotenuse, so we know it can't be sine. Cosine uses adjacent and hypotenuse, so it's not that one. And so tan is the one that we're going to use. Okay, so the first step I tell everybody, write your formula. Tan of angle, and that, remember, that means angle equals opposite over adjacent. So these are the ones you got to do a little bit more work to. Okay, so we're going to actually plug in more things. We're going to plug in for the angle. We're going to plug in for this part here. So we keep tan. A lot of times people forget tan, but tan is important. So tan, and then this means angle. So what angle did we have? Well, right here we already have it labeled, 55. So tan of 55 equals opposite. What do we have for opposite? We see x over adjacent. And we look here, we had 20 for that. So remember what we do next. We put tan of 55 over 1. We crisscross. So we have x over here on this side because we crisscross equals, make sure you get the whole thing, tan of 55 times 20. So we put tan of 55 times 20. Okay? And then we're going to plug that whole thing into our calculator. And we know we're going to plug into our calculator because x is by itself. So when x is by itself, this is the easy one. All we do is just multiply. Okay, so I wanted to show you all how to put this in your calculators. So I have this online calculator. And so what we're going to do, we're going to press the tan key, 55, close it, and then we're going to type in 20. And we should get 28, and I think it's set round to the nearest tenth. So, wait a minute, where did it go? I forgot the answer. 28 point something.